As we continue the discussion of the body, we listen in on a story, very old story about Abraham and Sarah. But to understand the context of the story, we have to back up a little bit and understand that Abraham was waiting for God to speak once again as we hear that covenant that Abraham was waiting for. For he had heard God in the 12th chapter of Genesis, as God said, "I will bless you, and I will bless your generations to come." But at 100 years old, Abraham was looking around and wondering, where are my generations? And so we join the story. And as we join the story, may our bodies be open to what seems impossible as God continues to nudge and call us. Listen now for the reading. As the Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks, Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day, and he looked up and saw 3 men standing near him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, so that I may wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." And so they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened into the tent of Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it, and make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant who had then hastened to prepare it. And then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared, and he set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree where together they ate. And they said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he said, "There in the tent." And then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I now have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I'll return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And the one said, "Oh yes, you laughed." A visit from the Lord takes on many, many forms. From a blank canvas to creation, to a burning bush, to a rainbow promise, Abraham's rest in the heat of the day, he was certainly waiting for something to happen. And as the Lord appeared as 3 strangers, their presence propelled the 100-year-old Abraham to action in the heat of the day. He arouses 90-year-old Sarah to join him in a joint work, to prepare and make preparations for their guest. Their bodies are in full motion, their thoughts spinning in their heads as their spirits are joyful, as they push forward in spite of difficulty. The Lord named as 3 strangers, a holy trinity of sorts, appears in the doorway. And Abraham, in that moment, invites them in. Without words, Abraham knows these visitors, and his actions speak of the importance. He knows something is going to happen. He knows this is the something that he has waited for. And so he invites them to sit and feast and share. in this unplanned, unexpected God moment, being birthed out of a willing spirit, in the hospitality of an aging couple, Abraham continues to work to find favor with God, for he knows how to set a table for God. And Abraham welcomes the Lord, not knowing what the Lord will bring, not knowing what exactly to expect. He is open to listening and to a dialogue in his 100th year of life. As the meal commences and the long-awaited conversation begins, the words come out that Sarah will have a baby. The tent walls seem to juggle or jingle at this impossible news. Sarah's going to have a baby? Now we know, because we read the scriptures with our realistic mind, we know that biologically and physically and emotionally this is impossible. And yet, in the Spirit's presence, Abraham welcomes the news, and the couple laughs in their own way, inviting God's planned promise of hope, of renewal, of a new beginning to take place. And Sarah's laughter is real. God uses the element of surprise and the unthinkable in a bold visit to show and shape certainly a new way forward. Sarah's disbelief is echoed in her laugh. Sarah's joy is voiced in her laugh. Sarah's body leaning into a conversation that is blocked by a canvas tent, she almost falls into the conversation. And for this unknown moment in time, at 90 years of age, something she may have longed for 50 or 60 years ago is now coming to her. It seems unnatural and upside down, but this visit from the three strangers, the Lord has turned this couple's life upside down, and her laugh, a nervous laugh, almost impossible, disbelieving response, is her reaction to the good news that the strangers bring. Abraham and Sarah, God in the form of three strangers. The body, is it really ready and equipped and able to carry through what God sees, what God can do? Two aging adults. Really, God, do you know what you are up to? Their bodies, are they really ready to care for toddlers, to chase children up and a child up and down? But three strangers equipped with a bold vision, and Abraham could have turned them away in the heat of the day, but instead found room for God and to make space for what God alone can do. Come with your news, O God, of the birth of a new baby. Come with your plans for new life and blessing. For God uses the body in mysterious ways, through laughter, through hospitality, to tell a story of how God will continue to move God's message of hope, of peace, of love forward. For God used 90-year-old Sarah as God used a young woman named Mary to give birth to a baby. A transforming act to continue to make real the covenant and promise that God makes with the world each and every day. A body to proclaim a new way forward through God's presence in the world. But where this story is made real is not in the wonder of Abraham's age or Sarah's age, but in a willingness to be hospitable to God's ways in the world. Abraham's willingness and openness to move from the shade and welcome the strangers is a way that he positioned his body to go from sitting to action, his ears to be open to what God's words are all about. Do we still believe that God continues to use our bodies in the ongoing message and engagement of God's hope, God's promise in the world today? For God is still at work and finds ways to use our bodies, young and old, and anything in between, to bring about transformation in the world. God uses our bodies in relation to ourselves and to the one who calls us by name to live out the covenant. But our thinking is sometimes closed to the possibilities of what can be helpful and useful. Certainly that was true with Abraham and Sarah. Sarah laughed when she heard what God had in store for her and for her family. Abraham, well, he was just silent about the whole thing. But how do we look at our aging bodies? I must admit I've started to linger a little longer in a few of the aisles at Walgreens. Those products are starting to look a little more useful to me. Somehow some lines have appeared in places that they were never before. And certainly these products, these scientifically tested products, will get rid of all that I no longer want to see and look at. For somehow I should be ashamed of this process of aging that is going on each and every day. And I have to buy into a culture that instead honors my years of learning and wisdom and experience, and instead tries to turn me back into something that I no longer am. Will God still use me in my years to come? That word "still" is awfully alarming, isn't it? Will God still use me? It's like how we use and talk about our older adults today. Can you believe it? She's still driving. He still climbs the stairs and mows his yard. He still has his license. What are we saying in our language and how we treat the bodies of our older adults? And do we not see that life experience comes through the process of aging and maturing? And are we like Sarah, that we can laugh in our aging? Or do we become still buying into a cream or a product that will make us young, instead of filled with wisdom to continue to be about the work that God has in store for us? Sarah did not burst into the tent and correct the visitors. She did not say, "No way, this is not happening to me." Instead, she used laughter. She laughed in a way that allowed her body to instead be rigid, but to be relaxed. She used laughter to lighten her mind, and the laughter of joy to lighten her spirit. Giving birth to God's way is not always easy, but in our ongoing work to make the kingdom of God here a reality, our bodies are vitally important to be vehicles of change and transformation, not only for ourselves and our own thinking, but to provide the balanced model that God still, in God's majestic way, uses our body to proclaim, to bring about hope, and to be bearers of hospitality to the strangers that we encounter each and every day. God confronts our resistance and still continues on with us as he did with Sarah and Abraham to find ways to restore, to renew, and to find hope in a culture that doesn't always welcome our bodies as is, but instead sees them as needing to be changed. God confronts that by saying, at 90 or 100, you still can bear witness to the hope, the love, grace, and peace that I am for you today. In our wellness focus, let us continue to strive for a balance that finds favor in God's creative design of using hospitality and listening and laughter, and not continue to see our faults, but to see how we can be used for God's goodness and grace to give birth to a new beginning in the here and now. Thanks be to God. Amen. Thank you for joining in worship today. After the service, please join us for lemonade out on the lawn, outside these doors, and just outside where we can continue conversations together. God comes, inviting us to be part of the covenant, the new beginning, the new story. Help us to find ways through our living to give birth to what is possible in the face of the impossible. And help us, like Sarah's laughter, move forward and not block what God is doing in our midst. Let us go in peace. Amen.